Happy Friday. I just got back to Decor after being in Indy all day. My mom's doing a lot better. This story is so, it's crazy. It's crazy. The doctor, Let me start from the beginning, but I'll make it a very quick version because it's very interesting. I don't know how much you know, how much I've shared throughout this whole thing, but back in July, it's September, July, they thought my mom had temporal arteritis. It's the inflammation of your temporal artery, because she had a horrible headache. The headache started at the back of her skull, came up the temple this way. Her eye kind of started turning in towards her nose. She started having vision issues, and then she started not being able to hear, and she was negative for the temporal arteritis, and some other things were going on. On top of that, her neck was an absolute mess. When she got the negative biopsy for the temporal arteritis, she went to see Dr. Fong in Fort Wayne. He's a neurosurgeon who looked at her neck and said, "You've got to get your neck fixed. Your neck is an absolute," he didn't say an absolute mess. That's my opinion, because it was. And I remember my dad and my mom and I saying, "Okay, Dr. Fong, what should come first, her neck or this issue? She can't see, she has a horrible headache, and she can't hear. So should we get that fixed or should we get the neck fixed?" And he said, "If you fall, you have a huge risk of becoming paralyzed." So we said, "Okay, let's get the neck fixed first." So this whole time when she's waiting to have surgery, she was sleeping 16, 20 hours a day. And we thought it was medication related because they put her on gabapentin. It's a nerve calming medication. It can be used for different things, but that's very sedating. And she had so much nerve pain shooting from the back of her head up into her skull that they increased it, and we thought it was the gabapentin causing the sleepiness. 2 days prior to her surgery, she was having surgery on 2 days ago today. So it was Wednesday morning at 2:00 in the morning. She called me 2:00 in the morning, and she said she couldn't get her alarm off on her phone. And I talked to her for maybe 5 seconds, hung up the phone, and I thought that was it. Ended up calling me 5 more times within a 10-minute span. And it was like a butt dial where you call and then it rings once and it shuts off, and then it rings twice and then shuts off. And by the 6th time, I got up, I went downstairs, it doesn't matter where I went, and I called her back and I said, "Mom, what's going on?" And she said, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, what are you having problems with?" Because she's never done that before. The way she was sounding, she kept saying, "I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know." And I said, "Go wake up Dad and go to the ER and get checked for a stroke," because I thought she was having some kind of stroke. She went to the ER. She didn't really have stroke-like symptoms. She wasn't weak on one side. She could answer questions. And they didn't do a scan because she wasn't showing signs of a stroke. They thought she would just had too much medicine, and they sent her home, which was not. Anyway, she had surgery, and ever since she had surgery, she has been going downhill to the point where when I was here visiting, I would go in and talk to her, and she would fall asleep just mid-sentence. She would sleep the entire time. So Wednesday morning at some point, and I've got to call the nursing home because I need to make sure that protocol was followed. My dad came in at 9 something and took one look at her and said, "You've got to call the ambulance because she had a very blank stare. She had no clue who he was. She was weak. She was almost falling. They took her from her nursing home to Adams Memorial. Adams Memorial took one look at her and sent her up to Lutheran in Fort Wayne. Lutheran Hospital did a scan and said, we don't know what this is. We're sending her to Methodist because we need an ENT skull surgeon. The MRI showed, and they did another MRI down at IU Methodist. The MRI showed something in her sinuses. And FYI, back up, she has not been able to breathe out of her nose for 3 weeks. No air. Whatever is in her sinus has grown up into her bone around her eye, up into her skull, into her brain, down here in her back of her skull, and there's a mass that is wrapped around her carotid artery. This whole thing, I think I said in the beginning, started in July. She had such a horrible headache. She called me and I said, go to the ER at Adams Memorial. She had a CT scan and it was negative. CT scans aren't the best, especially if you don't use contrast. It doesn't pick up all of the things. She went to a neurologist in Fort Wayne after her temporal artery biopsy was negative, and she said, I got this horrible headache and this whole side is affected. You're fine. You have a certain type of headache. This poor lady has been writhing in pain for weeks, and we had no clue. No clue, because everybody kept saying that she's fine. When she arrived at IU Methodist, I got a call in the morning saying, early morning, we need to start with the sinuses. We're going to do a sinus washout ASAP, because they think whatever is growing started in her sinuses. That's what they think. And they washed her sinuses out and found some fungus. So it might be fungus. It might be a fungal infection that has just snaked its way around. And she even has debris in her ventricles. The ventricles are the sacs of fluid in your brain. And he said you can see it in there. So she's on an antifungal IV drip, and she's on a broad spectrum antibiotic just to cover things. Yesterday, after the surgery, my dad and I cried the whole way. We were pitiful. We did not have high hopes yesterday. She was so out of it. They did a stroke scale or stroke test, and she failed miserably. She kept falling asleep. You couldn't even keep her awake for 2 seconds. And it was awful. Absolutely awful. I've never seen my dad's never cried in front of me. And he's sobbing on the way home. That was no bueno. The neurologist looked at her. They did another MRI and looked at it, and he said she's had 2 strokes, but the strokes are so tiny and it's affected her language. So that's why she's having problems word finding. She had no clue who my dad was yesterday. That was absolutely devastating to watch. They've been married for 61 years, and to see her look at him with this blank stare in his face, it was absolutely horrific. Today, she's a lot better. She was better today than she's been in a week or so. For whatever reason. I'm not sure why, but she's way better today. So the plan is to keep her there. They've got her on the medicine, and they're going to do a lumbar puncture to see how involved her spinal fluid is. If it's not a fungal infection, it could be some type of cancer. They don't know. But today, it was just nice when my dad walked in and we said, "Hey, Mom, who is this?" And she said, "That's Mike." And my dad's little face lit up. It's like, she didn't know who I was, but that's okay. She knew who her husband was, and she knew who my nieces were, my sister's kids. That's great. I'm glad she's naming people. But yeah, we just have to wait on the biopsies and the spinal fluid, and we'll go from there. Thank you for being here. Thanks for all the messages. I haven't even had time to go through them. I haven't had time to do anything. Thank you for just being here with us at the Blended Nest. I truly appreciate that. I really do. And my sweet husband's flying in tomorrow. So that's yesterday when I was at the lowest of lows, I thought, man, I just wish he could be here. And he called me last night and he said, "I'm booking my flight tomorrow. You need to come and pick me up." He said, "I need to give your dad moral support because I'm the only male. But warn your dad that I cry."